Hello and welcome to another Webisode Wednesday. I'm Jeff Phillips and I'm real happy with our guest here today. We have Holly. And Holly, why don't you explain to the viewers what it is that you do exactly?
Hi Jeff, my name is Holly Rickman and I am the Director of Services for Project Proud Families. We're an organization that serves families who have children with different abilities. We do this through support and education programs, and we also help by educating the communities in which they live so that they can also support the families as well.
Okay, sounds good. And how did you get involved in this, or why did you actually found the organization?
Well, that's a long story, Jeff. Our story goes back to our daughter. I had always worked in social work, so that was kind of my background. But until we had a daughter that was born typically, developed a horrific form of epilepsy called infantile spasms, and we now went through the process of trying to advocate with her through the medical system. We had a frustrated process. Even though she was my fourth child and I was a very experienced mommy, I wasn't being heard. And so finally, after taking her back to the doctor's appointment after she just had a well baby and they said she looked great, I said, I think we need to go back. And they noticed that she had a little bit of visual issue. Perhaps she wasn't dialing, so they were concerned. We went off to the ophthalmologist, and she had a mild visual issue called optic nerve hypoplasia. I said, okay, great, but we're not convinced that's all the issue. Her MRI was great, beautiful little brain. And so the pediatrician then sent her on to the pediatric neurologist, and he pretty much had a pretty dismissive report. She looked too good at that point. He didn't think genetics would be interested in her. She looked beautiful. This is our little girl here. She still had a lot of her, tone, everything developmentally. He thought she was in pretty good shape that way. And anyway, so I went back to her pediatrician, and I was still very concerned that there were issues going on. She was a little concerned as well, but I don't think she knew how to address the issue once he had dismissed it. So we then had an EEG just to, I guess, make sure that what the mommy was talking about with these extensor arm type movements were indeed seizures. The initial read was abnormal, but the resident who contacted us a week later said that she was calling the EEG normal. And this mama wasn't going for that at that point, and she basically said, well, if the initial read was abnormal and you couldn't tell between sucking artifacts, sucking on a pacifier, and seizure activity, then I think your attending needs to look at this EEG. So I had her forwarded on to the attending, and I said, can you say with all certainty that this is not something, going on with her? Well, he emailed back that he was suspicious that something was indeed going on with her. And at that point on, I started to have a little more attention paid to this mama. So then we started on a 2-day EEG, and all the while I was going like a maniac on the web. Googling everything, and I came across this article, and it made the hair on the back of my neck just stand up. And it literally said point blank what I had been talking about with my daughter, and that there was a little boy having sensor arm type movements. It was on a very generic epilepsy.org website I'm sure all neurologists are familiar with. And I emailed this article to her neurologist. And he said, well, I looked back at the EEG and I'm not seeing this classic pattern called hypsarrhythmia on her EEG. Well, you can have hypsarrhythmia, you can have modified hypsarrhythmia, and 25% of the time you can have different abnormalities on an EEG, and hers was spiking. So she did have an abnormality, it just wasn't hypsarrhythmia. And I said, I've been taking DVD footage of our child. And he said, please send that on. So I sent it on, and the next day I received a phone call. And he said, Holly, I just want to let you know she has infantile spasms. Because when they talk about infantile spasms, they talk about how intellectually delayed these children will be. It's not a diagnosis that anyone wants, but for a mama that knew something was going on, it was better to have a diagnosis in medicine to go along with it than nothing at all. So at that point, a week later, we were admitted into the hospital. And we went through a few different options for medication. They weren't the initial FDA regulation medications. We went B6 therapy, Zonegran. But actually on the Zonegran, her seizures stopped, and she didn't even go to full strength. And some good things she has in her favor is that she's in this category called cryptogenic, so there's no known cause for why these seizures started at 4.5 months old. But they also are more easily controlled, and the kid's prognosis is a little better. So this is what I was told at our second opinion. But at that second opinion, I was also told it took 6.5 months for our child to receive medication. And if your child receives medication within the first 2 months, that they can have a normal to near normal prognosis. Our child will most likely live with us for the rest of our lives. So that day was a pretty low point in our journey. And I wanted to basically make sure that no other family had to go through what we went through. Everybody wants to believe their doctor. You second guess yourself. You know, I know now that if we had taken that videotape and ran straight to the emergency room, that we could have saved ourselves that time. Videography is huge, and we try to educate the medical profession about requesting that from their patients, sending that videography on so that you can save that wait time to get into specialists, because that time right there can make you lose your window. So that's where it started, and that's where we kind of started in our program. I said, you know, I know now, I've been baptized by fire, and we have this different journey with our little angel. What can we do? How can we take lemons and make lemonade? And that's where Project Proud Families. I went to our accountant over in Pittsboro, had never seen the man before, but I knew that he worked with nonprofits, and I wanted to start this 501c3. And he was a great Christian man, and he helped us tremendously with so much advice, getting things going. I did a lot of the paperwork myself, and he just kind of edited things from there. And he warned me that a lot of times it can really take a while to have these 501c3s passed, and the federal government will often bounce them back at you with different things that you need to further correct. Well, I'm happy to say that the 501c3 just blew through. It was approved in an amazing amount of time. He said he hadn't seen one go through that fast before. And I just have always felt like God has been in the background of our journey. And, you know, I've always been a person that has a hard time handing over the steering wheel to someone. And it was the first time in my life that I knew that I couldn't deal with it all. I couldn't have control of it all. And, you know, I had to hand it over. And when I did, I think amazing things started to happen. I started to see the blessings in what seemed like such a dark time in our lives. And we were able to take something that was so challenging for ourselves financially, emotionally, and turn it into something that has just warmed my heart a million times over in helping others. And when I look at my daughter, I'm just so grateful for the inch stones. I don't look for milestones. And every little thing matters. And so many people miss that forest for the trees. And I think I learned to slow down and appreciate the little things, but all the while helping other parents get to that point where they can see something positive in that journey that's so frustrated.
Right. Well, that's a pretty amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. Certainly, I can see and hear from you the passion that's within, and it's very touching. One thing I want to that I also heard from you, which I think it's important to share, or at least bring to the attention, is you kind of took the matters in your own hands, it sounds like. I mean, one, you had a little video camera, and because of that, you were able to get faster results. Right. And two is you didn't really want the answer that the doctor was giving you knew wasn't enough.
Right.
So how do you help people now that you've been through that? If they have a similar situation, what do you tell them to, I guess, get to the answers faster, especially if the doctor's butting heads with them?
Basically, we try and help educate families to bring questions, to the doctor's office. And if they're not satisfied, that never really settle on one answer. I think most things, whenever you're looking at something serious with yourself or your child, you should have 2 opinions and sometimes 3 opinions, and that's okay. It's okay to have a different opinion than the doctors too. What I have found in the medical profession is that they don't even agree. So it really behooves yourself to get as many opinions as possible, formulate it all together with maybe what you feel like is the best thing for your child.
Great, good. All right, now I know you do, you offer several programs within your organization, so can you touch a little bit on, I think it was the free medical advocacy?
That was the first program that we started because obviously I was so frustrated in being heard as far as our child, and frustrated that she lost that window of having a normal life because we grieved the lack of a wedding, the lack of grandchildren, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is the grief process that goes along with people that have a diagnosis for a child. So that was our first thing that is so important to us is how do we empower people to feel like that when they have something that they feel is going on with their child, they're not being heard, what can they do with that? And so we had an Ask the Nurse and Ask the Pharmacist on our website. And we strictly told people that, this is not in lieu of medical attention. This is basically maybe just to corroborate, I'm feeling a little concerned for you too. And also someone that can maybe suggest there's a million different types of specialists out there and the most appropriate type of specialist for your child's need. And so we got a lot of support and attention that way. And that was one of our first programs.
Good, good. Now, obviously going to school can be a concern.
Yes.
I understand that you work with a lot of schools now, and can you just share a little bit about that?
We do. Because, we're a point of contact, so we do a lot of information referral. I hear a lot of family stories and a lot of families' frustration. And one of the areas in which families become very frustrated is if their child is diagnosed when they're young, you go through what is called early intervention, which you receive the ability to have many types of therapy in your home, from developmental, speech, occupational. Sophie at one point had 8 to 9 therapies going in our home at one time. I know, I was like, whoa. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so you have this opportunity to feel like you're really helping your child gain their best prognosis. And then, you transition at 3 years old over to the school system. And a lot of families explain to me as you feel like you're dropping off a cliff because the school only has to provide you what is, under the law of IDEA. And so parents want the Cadillac. And so what we tell the school system is, okay, we're going to educate our families that, they're really entitled to the you-go under the law. But what we say is it has to run and be serviced. You can do that for us. And so by building a bridge, and literally it's called the Bridges program with the school system, is we educate our families twice a year. We have IEP workshops. So they learn what they are entitled to under the law so that they can get maximum services and support in a free and appropriate education, but they learn what is appropriate under the law so that they can, get their child best served. But at the same time, they learn what they're not necessarily entitled to under the law, and that takes away a lot of frustration that sometimes the teaching staff and the EC staff has to deal with in the meetings. And families are just, they're ignorant. They have not come up against, they don't understand the law. So by doing all that, it creates a better relationship with the school system. And we're also, the Bridges is a support group, and we're going to be launching that very soon on Facebook. And, we're using all the new cutting edge social media out there to reach our families. We're always trying to, create a new face so that we can bring as many people on board as possible and support as many families as possible. We know it's hard to get out. We know it's another thing at the end of the day to attend a support group. So, if you can log on to that computer, and we know a lot of people are logged on nowadays, you can have an hour of maybe talking to an expert, maybe, getting to talk with the EC staff and understand some of the frustrations maybe your child's going through. So we're excited about this new venue.
Great. Well, good. Now, obviously, you talk about the community a lot.
Yes.
What type of things have you done to reach out to the community or to help the community?
We have some of the things I guess we're probably most known for is I've literally been dubbed the button lady. I have buttons that I go around and speak, and I've done this in a million different ways. I have spoken at community college, high school, churches, different social groups in the community. And basically helping them understand what a day in the life of our families is like and how frustrating it is. You know, a lot of times people don't understand the statistics of how marriages, you know, are more frustrated and end because of having a child with different abilities. Their finances are extremely strained. You have to sometimes pick between utilities and therapy that you know could help your child. The working poor, you heard about it all during the election. Well, you know, CAP IDD program, things that people don't understand. There is not medical support. There is medical support that is out there. Unfortunately, it takes 13 years to get on it for families that are not considered of an age, a wage earner for Medicaid. And, you know, these are a lot of tough frustrations that our families, you know, go through. But some of the positives that we've kind of done is, you know, now I would like to think that I've helped educate the community and how they can support different families in church when that child is perhaps has behaviors or, you know, is making noises because they're nonverbal, that church maybe knows how to wrap their support and love around that family. That says 10 times more about that church than anything that comes from behind that pulpit. And the social organizations to understand how they can, you know, perhaps, you know, try and help our families well. And we had our first annual wheelchair relay, and that was a wheelchair relay for all different abilities. Now, these wheelchairs were $250 each, and we raised money for 21 of them. That is how many wonderful businesses, churches, and organizations were out there that wanted to provide a wheelchair for Wheels for the World, which is through Johnny and Friends. And these wheelchairs, now these are brand new ones. A lot of times they just take and refurbish old ones. But for people that have no assistive technology in all, you know, aspects of the world. And anyway, we raced in them before we handed them over to the organization that day. And it was so cool because there was preschool kids. There was, we had the mayor pushing, you know, my treasurer who was the manager of the bank. And, you know, so everybody had an opportunity to see one. You need some pipes, you know, to work along in that wheelchair. And how the confinement, it's a psychological thing. You know, people don't really realize. And accessibility, we had different awareness activities. And the kids had to traverse over bricks and things like that. And it represented uneven sidewalks and, you know, and the kids were so involved in having a hands-on activity. It made them so much more aware. But my favorite moment that day was when they chose all on their own, all the races were over, and they took the wheelchairs out on the track, all of them, all these kids. It was just like a sea of wheelchairs on Jordan Matthews' track. And there were some kids that were permanently in wheelchairs, and there were some kids, many kids, that were not. But I was thinking for the first day, and those kids that are wheelchair bound for life, they were just like everyone else. And it was such a touching moment, you know, for me to see. Because we're always focusing on differences rather than our similarities. And these kids were all the same that day. So.
Wow, that's great. All right. Well, if you would like more information about Project Proud Families, where can they go?
Well, they can go to our website, and that's www.projectproud.org, or they can call me, 919-742-5525, or they can email me, holly@projectproud.org, and I'm more than happy to speak with anyone and help in any way I can, refer you information-wise, support you in your journey with your child with different abilities, and hopefully help you see the blessing in what can be sometimes a struggle journey.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate this.